This is KCAA.
Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome, friends. You are tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, where you can listen from anywhere around the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reid. Just a reminder that you can follow us on both Instagram or on Facebook if you prefer, or even Twitter now. But just look for Viewpoint with Father John, and you can follow us on those sites. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Father John Reid, R-E-I-D, the proper spelling of the word. And that's Father spelled out the formal way. So I hope you'll follow us on there. Those of you who do follow us on those platforms, I appreciate all your notes you send me. It blows me away every time I find out that you're on the other side of the world and you're sending these things to me, but it's great. We welcome all listeners, and we're glad you're here. So keep those cards and letters coming, as they say. All of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I'm on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing of false narrative and embracing genuineness inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help overcome self-imposed limitations in realizing one's spiritual potential. And folks, I want to remind you about the best pharmacy in all of California, maybe this side of the Mississippi, and that's Claremont Pharmacy. And you won't believe how lucky you are, because Claremont Pharmacy just happens to be located in the city of Claremont. Would you believe that? I'll tell you, it takes my breath away every time I think about it. But anyhow, Dr. Nikki Ho is the proprietor of that establishment. They take care of all my pharmaceutical needs, including everything I need for my diabetes. And it's the old-fashioned personal service. They know your name. They take care of your medications. They keep track of everything. I've never been so well cared for. So go over to Claremont Pharmacy. Tell them Father John sent you. And if you want the absolute best DJ services, you want LakesideDJServices.com. That's our own beloved Frank, who runs the sound on this show. We would be nowhere without him, because he always unplugs the cord before he leaves. So we're glad I'm here. But on a serious note, if you have some type of special event coming up, you want to call on Frank at LakesideDJServices.com. He also has the photo booth, and that's a heck of a lot of fun. So you go in there and do some crazy shots with your friends and have some wonderful memories. So definitely look up on that. And then finally, I want to tell you about my good friend Glenn Kirshner on Justice Matters on YouTube. You know, it's hard to get good information on some days, and if you really want to know what is going down legally, you want to tune into this Justice Matters on YouTube with Glenn Kirshner. And I tell you, he and I have been friends for a while, and he is very reliable. He was a federal prosecutor for 25 years, and he was also an Army JAG lawyer. He was a prosecutor in the Army for 6.5 years. So good people all the way around. So I hope that you will tune into that. You'll be glad you did, and you'll find out that the information that comes your way, you'll see is really reliable, a lot of integrity. I'm really excited tonight, because tonight my guest is my older brother, Bob. And I have to tell you, his resume, I've seen smaller books than his resume. He's very accomplished, including holding a Ph.D. But rather than go through the whole thing, which I really should do, but it would take, we'd be at the end of the show by the time I told you all of his qualifications, which is a good thing. He's the smartest man I've ever known. But what I've asked him to come talk about on the show tonight is the fact he's engaged in global development, working in South America, East Africa, Eastern Europe, with projects in Ecuador, Bolivia, Argentina, Tanzania, Kenya, and Ukraine. His projects largely focus on women in extreme poverty, refugees, and water and sanitation, peace building, healthcare, microenterprise development. And, you know, his current thing right now is he's working on helping women who are HIV positive in Kenya. In other words, Bob's doing some very important things all around the world. there are a lot of people who talk about doing things. Bob is doing things. I've said for a long time that hope without action is just a daydream. Hope has to be combined with action to be true hope. So, Bob, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. It's good to be here with you.
Good to have you on the show. How are you doing this evening?
Doing great.
Good. You're out there in the Republic of New Mexico. And so, talk a little bit about how does someone put something like this together, or even get involved with something like this. You have a finger in a lot of pies, helping a lot of people here.
Well, John, I'm a Rotarian, and I showed up maybe 12 years ago to a Rotary meeting, and I was early. I was hungry, so I went to the buffet line and got my lunch and went into the meeting room. And there was only one person there. It was a young woman that I had never met before. So I assumed she was our speaker, and I went over and sat down and talked to her. And it turns out her name is Jimena Murillo. She has dual citizenship in the United States and Bolivia, and she is a fabulous social entrepreneur with projects all over the world through an organization, a nonprofit here in the U.S. called the United for Change Center, based in Houston, Texas. And so I interviewed her, and I got very passionate about what she told me she was doing. And we became friends. She later asked me to become an advisor for her nonprofit, which I asked her, I said, well, what does that exactly entail? And she said, well, you have to obviously advise us on the development of our projects. You have to go with us to these projects, and you have to pay your own expenses. And I thought, well, that's fine. She said, and you have to pay a portion of our expenses. I said, okay. And she said, you have to carry our bags. I said, well, finally, there's something I'm qualified to do. And I've been doing it ever since. We've traveled the world together.
Real quickly, because I'm getting some feedback. Are you on speakerphone by chance?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. Then it must be my headset. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Okay, no worries. So there is one other country that you did not mention because I didn't give it to you that I should have overlooked, and that is we have a project also in Colombia focused on Venezuelan refugees. So we've done work in several countries, and it's been really exciting work. We typically work in rural areas that have great poverty, and with remarkably small resources, we do big things.
Right. Wow, it sounds like it. I remember seeing some photos from some of the projects where you're in this van bus on a cliff that there's no room for error. And I thought with my fear of heights, I would go through a whole pack of diapers before you got off that thing. I mean, just something else.
Yeah, you're referring to a project that was located high in the Andes Mountains of Bolivia. And the road felt like it was maybe 5 feet wide, and it had an unguarded side where the drop-off could be 3,000 to 5,000 feet. And it was treacherous, and it was a two-way road. There were times where we would have a bus or a major construction truck coming our way, and how they passed us, I don't have a clue.
Wow. Yeah. Well, how'd you manage to not have a panic attack while you're on that bus?
Well, I've just sort of adopted the attitude that if I can't control it, I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear that you're doing stuff in Colombia. I can remember when I was younger, I used to wait by the mailbox for my packages from Colombia, but I think we're doing two different charity things there.
You know, it's interesting. Do you remember a couple of years ago on the national news, there was an attempt to bring aid trucks from Colombia into Venezuela, over a bridge, and they were stopped by a tank, a Venezuelan tank that would not let the humanitarian aid into the country.
Yes.
I was on that bridge a couple of years ago, talking to refugees who were being forced across that bridge. And these are people that are very proud. The Venezuelan people are generally very well educated, but under the current government, a decision was made that they had to force 5 million people out of the country in order for the economy to work, given all of the sanctions, et cetera, that they were dealing with. And so people were wandering across this bridge, tens of thousands of them, aimlessly, just with glossed over eyes. All their entire possessions were what they could carry. And there were human traffickers waiting for them on the Colombia side.
Oh, wow.
It was awful. I toured the refugee centers, and my guess was there was probably one bed for every 500 refugees that came across the border.
Wow.
And so, and they're like jails when you come in. That if you're lucky enough to get a bed, they actually lock you into these facilities overnight. You get to stay one night unless you're pregnant, in which case you get to stay 2 nights. After which you're kicked out on the street and you have to fend for yourself. So you have lawyers, teachers, physicians who are having to prostitute themselves in Colombia in order to feed their families. They cannot practice their professions anymore.
Wow.
It is just a despicable circumstance. And to think that there are people and organizations waiting to exploit these poor people coming across the border is just unbelievable.
Yes. There's a lot of fear of that with a lot of stuff going on right now, that some people might wind up getting trafficked. In fact, in Poland, they were warning people as they're coming from Ukraine to be careful, and they had people looking out for people traffickers. So I know that's a huge problem. I understand from what you sent me that you're also on a campaign right now working with HIV positive women in Kenya. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there are just legions of women that are forced into the sex trade in Kenya. And when they become HIV positive, their families, their friends, and their communities turn their backs on them. They lose their ability to generate an income. They lose the love and support of their family. And they are incredibly dejected and isolated. They have medical treatment for their HIV infection, thank God. But what they don't have are support systems and the ability to generate an income through their own efforts. And so what we're doing is we're training a bunch of women who are in this circumstance to become future trainers of other women, to build islands of support, these women coming together to support each other, creating a sense of community where they have the dignity for the space that they actually occupy, the sense of fulfillment and belonging. And after we create these social support mechanisms and train people how to navigate the inevitable conflicts that happen just, in human interrelations, then we're teaching them entrepreneurialism skills so that they can develop their own businesses where they can have economic dominion. We're just trying to give them a sense of agency, a sense of humanity back in their lives. The project has already started. I was in a meeting with several of them recently. I've participated remotely. I'll be there in person in November. But the spirit of the women in that session was just palpable. They felt hope for the first time. They felt communion with other people. And they were so excited about learning how to support each other, how to support other women, how to create this system of support that allows them to feel their own humanity again. After all they've been through, to see the joy on their face in these sessions it's just remarkable.
Oh, my goodness. Talking about expressions on faces, my sound engineer, Frank, is looking at me through the glass saying if I don't go to commercial, he's going to change the expression on my face. So we'll be back in 90 seconds. You're listening to Viewpoint with Father John.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org, www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
As a small business owner or decision maker looking to start a new business, are you frustrated with having to handle all the administrative business for your company? A constant turnover of bookkeepers and staff to keep the business running and out of trouble while you are trying to grow your company? You can't do all this paperwork and expand your business too. Executive Services can provide your company with Chief Financial Officer services, including tax return preparation and advice, bookkeeping, financial statement preparation and analysis services, loan package preparation, payroll, marketing services, notary services, new business formations, business liability insurance services, and an on-call CFO to help you with any business questions or issues you run into. Call Executive Services at 800-707-1477 now to get your company organized and have a peace of mind. For only a couple of $100s a week, you can have an experienced CFO on call to handle all of your company's administrative issues and problems. Call 800-707-1477 or visit the Executive Services website, www.xscbs.com, for more information.
And welcome back. You're tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere around the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reid. And just a reminder, if you miss an episode, you just go to YouTube, type in the search bar, Viewpoint with Father John, KCAA, and you'll get more than 4 years worth of episodes. I can't believe that we've passed the 4-year mark a few months ago. Just blows me away. My guest this evening is Dr. Bob Reid, who is my older brother, the smarter of the two of us, and we're talking about some of the things he's doing globally, bringing both dignity and hope to other people. We talked earlier that hope without action is just, wishful thinking, and so he's putting action with hope. And Bob, when you're talking, I was thinking about a friend of mine. He and I had gone to a funeral together, and when we signed the guest book after his name was Chip, he put DDS. I said, Chip, you're not a dentist. What's the DDS for? He says, that's what the way of life I'm in now has given me. Dignity, decency, and self-respect. And it sounds to me that this is what you're giving the people that you're working with, if I'm hearing you correctly. Would that be a fair analogy?
It is, John. The organization I mentioned earlier, United for Change Center, is putting together what's called a resiliency journal. Mm-hmm. And it is this masterful set of remarkable photos of nature and the resilience in nature, accompanied by quotes from 100 people from around the world on what resilience means to them. And while we all are concerned about him, and we try to advance good public policies that enable people to be successful in their lives, for communities to be able to grow, etc. At the end of the day, I'm convinced the thing that matters most is personal resilience. And that's why this journal is so important. And if you looked at all of the projects that we've been involved in so many countries, what we're seeking to do is to unlock the natural, hardwired resilience in spirit in individuals, because when that happens, the impediments that otherwise are in their lives subside and they rise above them. So people need to be able to feel good about who they are, to believe that they have worth, to have a sense of vision of what's possible in order to dig deep and find that resilience that allows them to overcome remarkable challenges.
Well, it sounds like you're doing something that comes from a saying that you and I grew up with, that give a man a fish he eats for a day, teach him how to fish he eats for a lifetime. And it sounds like you're giving some very powerful fishing lessons over there.
Yeah, John, we had one project in a small village where women were only allowed to go to the first grade in their education. And so they had never learned how to read or write. And we taught over 200 women how to read and write, which just, you can imagine how that changes the trajectory for them, but also for their family, because now all of their children and grandchildren will know how to read and write because they'll teach them.
Yes.
And I had the occasion to give a speech before this village, which I practiced hard to give in Spanish. It was a very tortured speech. I tortured that beautiful language. But they appreciated my effort to try. And when I was done, this young mother got up who the year before had never been able to read or write, and in front of about 400 of her fellow villagers, read flawlessly from this book. And I sat down next to a friend of mine from El Paso, Texas, who looked at me and said, "She just put you to shame." That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, well, that's amazing stuff. And while we get a little humor with it, there's no words that can describe when you see your work go to fruition with somebody who, without some type of intervention, wouldn't have had these opportunities. And they're receiving them and not just seeing what it looks like, you're actually helping them accomplish it, which is powerful stuff. And one of the things that I like best, you talked about the spirituality of it, which I absolutely agree with. But the fact that you're not a religious program doing this, I think is great, because they don't have to accept some type of dogma to receive this. And I don't mean to sound hostile towards anybody. I've worked with different feeding programs, and some of them would require that people have to, say some type of prayer with them, sinner's prayer, whatever. And I've always felt that if you have to pay for the meal with your dignity, the price is way too high. You're better off not going in the first place. And, sometimes religion catches people when they're desperate, and that's not really help. That's kind of a hostage situation, as far as I'm concerned. It's just my opinion, but I'm right. And so, so in seeing this, what does that do inside of you? Watching the Spirit work through you in this way that doesn't have to be identified as anything religious.
John, you can look all around us, here in this country and in many places around the world, and be easily discouraged by so many things that are going on.
Yes.
There's so much in the news that is distressing. When I go to these third world countries and meet with people who have literally nothing, who are happy and want to help each other, and want to build strong communities, and they want nothing from us that they can do for themselves. They merely want from us what they could not do for themselves, such that they then can do it for themselves. It gives me inspiration and hope in humanity again. It reminds me that there is something bigger than all of us. And this is not a religious statement. This is just a recognition that the human spirit is linked, that the human spirit is powerful, that the human spirit can overcome remarkable challenges,
Yes.
and that when it's triggered in the proper fashion, it shows up for good. And that's so exciting to see and to be reminded of. It just is, it's a wonderful experience. I mean, I don't get paid for any of this work.
Right.
I actually write checks and do fundraising for this nonprofit. I pay all of my own expenses, and I pay a good portion of their expenses. Because the income I get is psychic income. It's the reward of knowing I've been involved in helping people to rise to a level they never knew they could. And that's pretty handy compensation.
Yes, it is. And I can remember a while back you sharing with me something that struck me deep, because I see it quite a bit with just some of the cursory work I've done with the very poor. And you had mentioned that some of these places you go to, the poorest among the poor, and they're the most generous people and the happiest people, and whatever they have, they make sure it's enough to share with you and anyone else. Can you talk on that for a little bit? Am I getting that correctly?
Yes. It is amazing to me that the poor contribute a much higher percentage of whatever it is they have to the benefit of others than the wealthy ever have.
Mm.
And the graciousness that when you go into South America or East Africa and you go into somebody's home, like, say, a village like Makiba in Tanzania, where the village huts have floors of dirt. There's no electricity in there. They have no public utilities. They don't have running water, and they have very limited food supply. When you show up, they're so glad to see you, and they immediately fraction off a portion of whatever it is they have, however small it is, for you.
Yes.
And they graciously extend that to us. And I know they didn't have a pot or a window.
Right.
And yet, whatever it is they had, they wanted to generously share it with me and with others.
Mm. Wow. That hits me deep just listening to that. I've heard you mention that before. Every time I hear it, it just touches me in a new way. Because, it reminds me of something that is accredited to St. Francis of Assisi. He used to say to his friars, go out and preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. And, it's giving that living expression to a deep spirituality that doesn't have to be named. In fact, if you can name it, I think you don't understand it in the first place because you think you can confine it to something. But I do believe this. It's a verb, not a noun. It's an action expression. And so that's really cool stuff. And, a friend of ours used to say that love is a divine paradox. When you go out to get, you come back empty. When you go out to give, you come back overflowing. And what an opportunity you have doing that. And these people are practicing that they're being that expression of love. And while they may not have material things, they do know what love is all about. And I think sometimes some people mistake poverty for a lack of intelligence or ability to do certain things spiritually, emotionally. And I think that's a shame. I think they have a lot to teach us, to be honest. So.
Well, John, there are also cultural issues that we sometimes bump into. Whenever we go to a certain village in Bolivia, they always do something they call a paella, which is like Hawaiian luau, where they cook all this food underground.
Mm.
And they're very proud of it. And you know that I have some fairly restrictive dietary issues.
Yes.
And so I get served this dish, and I sit down, and immediately the woman that I told you about, Jimena Murillo, sits on one side of me, and her sister, Carla Murillo, sits on the other side of me, and they look at me and quietly say, "You will eat that." because of the fact that you're not going to disrespect these people. It never occurred to me that my dietary restriction would be interpreted as disrespectful, and yet it was. And so of course, I just ate whatever they gave me. We also had some other funny times. These are not always tragic times, but they're funny times sometimes. Like we're out on the Altiplano of Bolivia, and our van has a flat tire, and it turns out the spare tire doesn't have enough air in it, so we have to jump this bus, and the bus is full of chickens that are alive, going all over the place, and we have to sit on bags of potatoes. It really is quite something. So we get to this village where we're supposed to talk with these folks and try to encourage them, and then now we don't have transportation to get back, but I am the guest speaker back in the urban city of La Paz, and so they put us into an ambulance, and they take us down these dirt roads that are bumpy. But that was the one day I made the mistake and put my toothbrush under the faucet. So my stomach was agitating, and I'm bumping up and down for 2 hours. And I'm complaining to my team, we're late. We're going to be late. And we show up for my talk 2 hours late. And they keep saying, why are you worried about it? I said, because we're 2 hours late. Everybody's going to be gone. When we arrived, we were the first ones to arrive. So you learn to slow down and accept that people have a different sense of time, a different sense of preference and culture. And it's beautiful when you can stop and actually see it.
I learned that kind of the hard way. I worked with a number of Filipino priests. And, when I get invited someplace, I'm particularly if I'm giving a talk, I'm at least a half hour to 45 minutes early. I just have a real fear of being late. And I would go to these different things we're supposed to be doing as a group, and it'd be an hour or two before the people would get there. And I say, don't you guys have watches or something? And he said, Bishop, we're on island time. And island time means if it's 2 o'clock, it means anytime after 2, we'll be seeing you. So
I've had that happen more times than not.
Yeah, and when come from a culture where everything is run, I don't know about you, but it's a real adjustment for me to learn to slow down. Since I started having the health problems, that's been the hardest thing for me to learn. Now, my body teaches me lessons about it when I don't slow down enough, because this last week, as you know, I was going through it because I pushed myself too hard once again, because they know something that I'm still trying to learn, which is how to slow down and just be one with life. So it's tough. So now you're doing this. If someone else is interested in getting involved, is there ways for other people to get involved with this kind of thing?
Yeah, actually, they can go to the website www.united4changecenter.org, and they can connect with this organization. They're so inclined, they can contribute to this charitable organization, tax-deductible gifts, or they can sign up to be helpful and maybe even go on some of the trips, including the trip that we have to Kisumu, Kenya in November. Every year we take a group of people from across the country to these different projects, and we give them the opportunity to volunteer, to interact with people. Every single person that has gone on these trips with us has come back to me and told me that the trip changed their lives in ways they were not expecting. It changed their perspective, and they were hooked.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well,
there's just, as you know, there's nothing quite like meeting people where they are and helping them to come to where they can be.
Well, while you've been talking about this, Frank has been putting your website up on the monitor here for anyone following us on YouTube. They can see that and get that information. And we're getting ready to go to commercial break again, our last break. But I'm going to ask Frank to put that back on instead of our usual show thing so that people during the commercial could have an easier time getting it. So you're listening to Viewpoint with Father John, and we'll be back in 90 seconds.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org, www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
As a small business owner or decision maker looking to start a new business, are you frustrated with having to handle all the administrative business for your company? A constant turnover of bookkeepers and staff to keep the business running and out of trouble while you are trying to grow your company? You can't do all this paperwork and expand your business too. Executive Services can provide your company with chief financial officer services, including tax return preparation and advice, bookkeeping, financial statement preparation and analysis services, loan package preparation, payroll, marketing services, notary services, new business formations, business liability insurance services, and an on-call CFO to help you with any business questions or issues you run into. Call Executive Services at 800-707-1477 now to get your company organized and have a peace of mind. For only a couple of $100 a week, you can have an experienced CFO on call to handle all of your company's administrative issues and problems. Call 800-707-1477 or visit the Executive Services website, www.xscbs.com, for more information.
And welcome back, friends. You are tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere around the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reid, and my guest this evening is my brother, Dr. Bob Reid, and we've been talking about the work he's doing all around the world, empowering people, and in doing it in a way that it's a power that they can carry with them that will continue to grow and manifest in many different ways that makes whole villages rise to a new level. I was taught early on that when you change the consciousness of one person, you change the consciousness of all those around them, at least by a little bit, if not by a great bit. So, Bob, tell us a little bit more. During the commercial, we did have your website up on the screen for all the people watching on YouTube, and so they know how to get a hold of you. What are some things you would recommend for them?
Well, it just depends on what their interests are, John. We have projects in several countries. We have many, many different projects in Bolivia. We have the one we talked about in Colombia. Mm-hmm. We have one project in Ecuador, one that's developing in Argentina, 3 in Tanzania, 1 in Kenya, and a really exciting one in the Ukraine. People can get involved either through volunteering. They can contribute to this nonprofit organization. Its work. This is the little nonprofit that could. It's amazing what it can do and how far its reach is. It actually even has a project in Nepal. Mm. The project in Ukraine, are you interested in knowing a little more about that?
Yes. In fact, I was just going to ask if you can elaborate on that a little bit, because I have great interest in everything going on over there right now.
Well, we all hear these terrible stories about what's going on in Ukraine, and it's just dreadful what's occurring to these poor people. As a small nonprofit, how in the world would we have the opportunity to have levered impact for people in the Ukraine. Well, I was able to put together a partnership between this nonprofit and a multinational technology company that has 3,000 employees in the Ukraine. And we were able to raise funds and use the backbone capability of this for-profit company to identify the people in the Ukraine who needed help. And we were able to target help according to what the needs were. We know that there are lots of publicly provided forms of transportation for refugees to move from point A to point B, but there are whole villages that don't have public transportation.
Right.
We've paid for buses to send to those communities to get people and get them out. We have provided temporary housing through Airbnb in the countries that have received these refugees. We have provided emergency food support and other kinds of supplies that people need because they're coming out of this country with nothing but the clothes on their back.
Yes.
And it's amazing that for relatively, very small dollars, we're having very significant impacts for thousands of people, helping them in the most dire of circumstances to get out of harm's way and to be able to get some of the very basic needs that they have for shelter, food, and clothing.
Outstanding. I want to digress with a question real quick about the website. Now, for this particular thing, can they donate to that website if they want to?
They can, and there actually is there is the capacity on the website to make a donation, or they could just simply send a check in to the United for Change Center at the address that is on the website. It's all gifts are tax deductible because it is a U.S. 501c3 public charity organization, and the funds go to amazing purposes. This is an organization that has very little overhead. Most of the funds that we raise for these specific projects go straight to these projects. They're going straight in. For example, the funds we raised for Ukraine, 100% of every dollar that we raised went right into the charitable activities inside Ukraine.
Wow.
That's been true for almost every single project that we've done. We independently raise funds for United for Change Center so that it can keep its doors open and administer these projects. But it's a very frugal organization that partners with a lot of different organizations on the ground because they refuse to do anything that somebody else is available to do. They partner with organizations all around the world in some of the most effective ways I've ever seen partnership on. And I've actually done some research on philanthropic collaboration that I've actually published on.
Yes.
And they do what you need to do to have effective collaboration, to have organizations come together and actually keep the beneficiaries primary in mind and work in a seamless fashion.
I really take this to heart, and it means a great deal to me. And I'm going to say something that probably some people won't appreciate over the air. But in my years in the priesthood, there was different organizations that I would get asked to be involved with, and I'm not going to say some names of them, although they'd be very well known, but they were international organizations, and every dollar that's donated to them, only about 6 cents goes to charity, and the rest goes to administrative costs. And so when you're talking about giving 100%, I just want people to have an idea what that really means. That's serious, because these other well-meaning organizations, they spend so much on administration. Like I said, only 6 or 7 cents on average gets to the charity for use. So you guys are really doing a heck of a job on that. And I just want my listeners to realize the magnitude of what you're talking about.
This is an organization that is purely mission-driven. It was created by 3 Latinas who were themselves born out of very difficult circumstances. And they adopted this passion. One is an international business expert, one is a pediatrician, and one is an economist. And they they developed this very lean organization that is so efficient. I had, there are some, as you know, there are some very, good but very large nonprofits that do some important work.
Yes.
And then there are a few small ones that do unbelievable work, and that's what this one is.
Yes, it sounds like that, and I don't have, I have the background from a different point of view, from ministry than the background that you have coming into it. Of course, you also did a lot of charity things, as nonprofit things as well, with Cedar House and other things like that, and Rancho Laguna Sega. But sometimes people don't understand that not all 501c3s are created equal, and just because they're huge, they do some wonderful work. But I like to watch the ones that do more work than getting newspaper coverage, if you know what I mean. And I've watched you do some of these things, and while there certainly has been news that has followed some of these things, I've never ever seen any of this used as a glory hound. It's all been about the action and seeing where you can do even more than you're doing now, which is just incredible. Every time I think you've gone as far as you can with this stuff, I get an email from you or a paper that you've just done that takes it to a new level. And it's just, it's a lot of good you're doing. It means a great deal to me, and I'm very impressed by it. And that's why I want our listeners to hear about what you're doing, because sometimes these days we can feel so powerless and so helpless to help other people. I think this offers an opportunity for people. I sound like Salvation Army. I love them, don't get me wrong. But for listeners who are looking to be involved with something that's bigger than yourself, I highly recommend give this some consideration. If not this organization, some other, because we're not as powerless as we think. We're just not engaged. And when we know how to get engaged, it's amazing the power that we discover. But the power is not about us. The power is about something bigger than we are. What are some of the thoughts? We're in our last about 7 minutes, and what are some thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with this evening, Bob?
I think we all have passions. Some of us have been fortunate enough to unlock them. My passions aren't a new car. They're not some material possession. My passion is about giving back, because I believe that giving and receiving are reciprocal.
Yes.
That you have to give in order to receive. I'll give you an example. I'm not an independently wealthy man, and yet I write fairly significant checks to this organization. And I remember the first time that I wrote a $20,000 check to them, and I thought, "Oh my God, I've never written a check like that in my life." And I wondered, how I was getting ready to retire. You just don't part with money like that.
Right.
And then unknowingly, about this gift, because I just did it privately, a friend comes to me and says, "Hey, by the way, I'm doing a house flip. Do you want to partner with me?" And I said, "Okay." And it just so happens that what I got out of that was $20,000. So I ended up at the end of the year the same amount of money that I started with. And I can't tell you how that happened. All I know is that you have to be generous in order to receive. And
Yes.
Generosity isn't always in writing a check. Generosity sometimes is showing up to maybe a food bank or a pantry or a soup kitchen and volunteering to do the work to get that food to people. We have our time, our talent, and our treasure. And the luckiest people in the world have the ability to combine all three for the benefit of other people. And right now, in this time, it seems so convenient to demonize people who are in one way or another different than us.
Right.
Maybe who believe differently than we do, maybe look differently than we do, maybe come from a different place than we do, and yet we're all the same. And when we are in the position of being able to give to our fellow human beings, we learn they're no different than we are. They live and breathe the same fears and desires. They want to have the opportunity to be significant in their lives. And we give them that opportunity, and they turn around and they give it to somebody else. It's like throwing a pebble into a pond, and you see the ripples just reverberate out. They just keep going further and further. I do believe that you cannot contain human suffering.
Right.
If you allow human suffering to continue long enough in one location, it will eventually travel to another.
Yes.
Similarly, if you are able to improve circumstances in one place, that improvement will travel somewhere else. And lastly, I would just simply say that I do a lot of work in terms of peace building. And there are two concepts. There's the concept of negative peace and the concept of positive peace. Negative peace is when you achieve peaceful conditions at the end of a gun. In other words, somebody else is exercising enough control over you that you have to comply. And so you act in peaceful ways because of that, not because you chose to, but because you had to.
Right.
Positive peace is when you create a set of opportunities, conditions, resources in which people believe they can improve their lives and the lives of others. When that happens, people naturally want to participate in peaceful ways. They contribute to the peacefulness of others because they see opportunity. We have to move from negative peace to positive peace if we want it to last.
It's amazing how each road gets continued by the energy put behind it, where it's the peace through duress or peace through development. And those are huge things to be aware of. I think for too long we've looked at imposing peace on people, which has always come back to bite us with more violence, opposed to what you're talking about doing, which is empowerment of people. And I don't think you can get any better than that. It's just powerful stuff. And I appreciate everything that you do there. And I know you're having time with my nephew, Mallet, and I hope he's doing well over there.
Well, he gets married on Saturday.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. And outstanding. Nobody told me.
Just did.
Just did. Yeah, yeah. So what's the other guy think about it? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, please tell Mal I say congratulations and a belated Happy Mother's Day to Cheryl. I want to thank you for coming on tonight, Bob. You gave a lot of really good information. I think is quite important. And for anyone who needs that information on the website, go to YouTube and pull up tonight's show, and you'll get to see it. And for the donations, Frank actually did a tutorial while we were talking on screen, so you can see how to donate and to work the different drop-down things. And so if no one's told you this week that they love you, let me be the first. And thank you for spending so much time with us. Bob, is there any last thing you'd like to throw out there?
Well, John, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, to be able to talk about this work. And I want to thank Frank for his support and assistance. This is a really wonderful opportunity, and I know that this resonates for you because I know what you're committed to and what you're made of. And I just want to make sure you know how appreciated you are.
Well, that's nice. Thank you. You know, we've come to hard road, you might say.
Yeah, brother.
But you know, with some power that was greater than ourselves, we've been introduced to some really great people that helped us walk down the road a little further. And I dedicate tonight's show to one of them, which was Lionel Smith, who was a friend of both my brother Bob and myself, where we grew up. And so this show is dedicated to him tonight. Another great man who had a deep spirituality, who reached out to help many people over the years. So, Bob, thank you again for being on the show, and I look forward to tomorrow morning's texts back and forth. You know, Bob and I have a very close relationship, which where we come from is a big deal. I'm not going to go into all that, But I always love the fact that now we have daily contact because we come from a family that doesn't really have that kind of relationship. So Bob started a new tradition with that. Well, you've spent another hour with us, and so I look forward to being with you again next week. And you've been listening to Viewpoint with Father John. God bless.